Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show. Autumn is here. I'm your host, Francine Crawford. And today we are going to speak to Barbara Karnes. She is an end of life educator. And we welcome her to the show. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to an exciting, stimulating conversation.
Well, I know that you work with a lot of people with end of life, and you are RN also. So just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, I am a registered nurse. I graduated from nursing school in, you ready, 1962. And when I graduated, I thought, oh my goodness, I've made a huge mistake. Should have never been a nurse, should have been a social worker. So I got married, I raised a family. I did not work in the medical field. And in hindsight, that was my gift. I just didn't know it at the time. In late 70s, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came forward and said, Americans are not treating their dying well. And I kind of perked up. And at the same time, Dame Cicely Saunders in England developed what she called hospice. And that was taking care of people at end of life. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So I went back to nursing and did a refresher course. And I went to work for the first hospice in Kansas City. And I was a primary care nurse there for 5 years. Then I became their director and went on to be director, all kinds of other stuff. But the point I want to make is I believe that my never having worked in the medical field was the gift, because my patients taught me what dying was like. And no one knew, and still, people don't die like they do in the movies. And yet we don't know that, because that's our only role model anymore, is how Judi Dench dies in a movie. So I learned by being at the bedside of many, 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 we're probably in the 1,000 number of people who were dying and at the moment of death. And that's where my knowledge to be an end of life educator came from.
Okay. Wow. That's very interesting. One of the first places that started that, you were a part of that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Pioneer. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
We didn't really know what we were doing. We just made it up as we went along. And, I used to stand on the front porch before I rang a doorbell. And I'd say, oh, dear God, I seek to heal, not hurt. Because really, we were in new territory. Right. Our medical model treats diseases that people have. That's the emphasis, is on the medical, on diseases, where end of life work is on the person that happens to have a disease.
Right.
And that's a big difference.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, when we're talking about end of life, of course, it's really difficult for the person with the disease or the illness. But how do you see what happens to caregivers, and how that toll is on a caregiver dealing with someone who they've been caring for a period of time, and then it's coming close to the end?
Caregivers are the unsung heroes of any story about illness and approaching end of life. It seems like all of our attention goes to the person that's sick. And yet the sicker they are, the more the caregiver has to do. And it's not just a shift work. It's 24/7 if
Yes.
you're taking care of someone in your home that has medical issues. And what I have found, and certainly have worked with many caregivers, because hospice doesn't just take care of the patient, they take care of the family and the caregiver.
Mm,
And what I found is that the caregivers tend to put themselves last.
mm,
Everything comes before the caregiver. The patient comes, the dishes, the laundry, sleep and food for the caregiver are really the out of the picture. What I encourage caregivers is that they have to learn to put their own oxygen mask on first
mm,
before they can help someone else. And they can love their person, but they have to take care of themselves, getting proper sleep, getting proper food, getting relaxed time, getting away from the situation time. All of that's so important in order for them to continue to give care.
mhm. Well, interesting. Like there are a lot of different things that they can do because every situation is different, and getting care for the caregiver can look so many different ways. Now, I know that you can rest or you can do things that's within your power, but is there any outside help and resource that you can suggest to caregivers to look to help them?
Well, depending upon where their special person is in relationship to the dying process. If if they're just old and you're taking care of mom because she's old and she can't take care of herself, um, getting church help. A lot of churches have groups of volunteers that will come in and stay so you can go to bed or so you can leave. Um, Talking to a social worker, and this is from your physician, get a recommendation, or the hospital social worker to see what community services are available to
Mhm.
help getting, help at night so that you can sleep. That's a problem, I think, because that costs money. And most of us don't have the amount of money that it costs to hire caregivers. So we do it ourselves. Um, and that's really hard, and we need help. If the person has a life threatening illness, if they have been told they can't be fixed, then if there is a time given, and I'm not going to say months because you don't want to put a specific time frame
Okay.
on someone, so you don't say you have 6 months to live because you can't be that specific. But if the physician has said, I can't fix you and you're going to die someday, I don't know exactly when, um, call hospice. Start with a palliative care program, which most hospitals offer. And there you can still receive treatment,
Mhm.
and yet you get extra support and care. And when it looks like you have months to live, 6 months, it can even go into 12 months. That's the time to get hospice, because hospice doesn't just take care of the patient. Hospice takes care of the family. Hospice takes care of the caregiver. Hospice provides services, medical equipment, oxygen, hospital beds, bathing, a lot of services and support for the caregiver.
Awesome. Uh, I want to go back to something that you said. Last year, we had someone who introduced palliative care to many of my audience. A lot of people have not heard of that. When my mom had Alzheimer's, I was introduced to that. So, can you please expand on that? What palliative care is?
Well, palliative care is really kind of a gray area because different programs do different things.
Mm,
Where hospice, you've got specific guidelines to follow. So a hospice is a hospice, hopefully is a hospice. But palliative care um, is really broad. How I see it as offering support and resources to someone who has a life-threatening illness. I
mm,
didn't say a life-ending illness, but a life-threatening illness. I
mm.
think that's the key to palliative care because they can still be receiving treatment and trying to get better. Where with hospice, you're not receiving treatment and you recognize that you're not going to get better.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, what do you say to after you've cared for someone, you go through the end of life with them, they've they're passing away, they passed away. How do caregivers get back to themselves? What suggestions would you have? What do you think?
That's a really tough question because how we grieve really is according to our personality. How we deal with other challenges in our life is really how we will grieve as well. And by that, I mean, if I am a doer, goer, always have to be busy, which actually I am, then I will put all of my energies into something so that I don't have to look and feel the emptiness and the sadness that is inside of me. So you look, some people, anger is their outlet. And so they're going to be angry and upset with all that happened. We channel our grief and it comes out in our personality. At first, in grieving, our special person dies and we're just numb. We don't really feel anything. We go through the motions of the visitation, the funeral. We're numb. And then gradually that numbness wears off. And that numbness can be, now we cry and we feel sad, but we're still numb inside.
Mm,
And at some point, and that can be weeks, it could even be months, that numbness wears off. And you think, oh my goodness, I feel worse now than I did when dad died.
mm,
And that's really when your grief works begin. Um, it's grief is a whole bunch of emotions rolled up into one package that we label grief. And everyone's going to deal with their emotions differently.
mm,
Grief is like a wound. Let's say I have a cut on my arm, a great big open gaping wound, and the pain is just awful, awful. That's how we feel when our special person dies. But gradually, that wound on my arm will heal and a scar will form over that big, what was once an open, gaping wound.
mm,
Now, grief is just like that. The scar that I have on my arm doesn't hurt, but if I touch that scar, it feels different than the rest of me.
mm,
And that's grief. Because 20 years later, you can be walking down the grocery aisle and stand in front of the oatmeal and go, oh, He ate oatmeal every single morning of his life, and tears will be there. And that grief, that sense of loss is there. Something touched the scar.
Mhm.
Grief doesn't go away. We learn how to live with it, and learning how to live with it, it expands to allow us to get, expands isn't the word. It does not have the intensity forever.
Okay.
It just is, the intensity is there when something touches the scar.
Okay. Okay. That was a good way to put it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that you have an end of life series. You have guideline books and series. Um, you you've been doing this for a while, so you have different topics. You talk about the pain and the end of life and things like that. My friend and I care. Can you tell us how we get your series? How we get your series of books?
Go to my website, um, or Google Barbara Karnes, but go to my website at bkbooks.com. And I write a weekly blog, which you can sign up for. And you just get an email with a short article that I write every week. And at the website, you can order any of my books. And what I've got that people find helpful is gone from my site. It's known as the Little Blue Book, which explains the signs of approaching death, because there are only two ways to die. You either die fast or you die gradually. And fast death has no pattern to it. You're alive 1 minute and dead the next. That's getting run over by a truck, heart attack. Gradual death is disease or old age, and that begins months before death actually happens. So Gone from My Sight explains the signs of approaching death that occur months before death from disease or old age, weeks before, days and hours before. Because we don't have role models, we don't know what to expect. So that's the guide there. Then I wrote The 11th Hour, its companion. And the companion says, here's what you do while all the stuff in the blue book is happening. So they go together. Here's what's happening. Here's what you do while it's happening.
Okay.
I just wrote a brand new book. This booklet came out this week on food. And it's eating is a whole different ballgame when it comes to end of life. But most people don't know that, and we push food. And the name of the booklet is Always Offer, Never Force, which kind of puts food description in a package, because that's what we're offering. So that's a booklet. I have one called A Time to Live that is for the person that's had a diagnosis of a life-threatening illness, whether it's just a life-threatening well, let me say this. As long as they have energy to read, then A Time to Live will be helpful. It helps them see they've been given a gift, and that's a gift of time, and how to use that time wisely. I also have a booklet on dementia, because we're having more and more issues with dementia, and dementia doesn't play by the rules. And so a booklet to guide and support someone who's a caregiver for someone with dementia. Pain at End of Life is another booklet, because we don't understand pain management, period, let alone pain management at end of life. It's different. And dying itself is not painful. Disease causes pain. And so looking at how to treat the disease and the pain it creates versus actually dying. You don't have to have pain medicine just because you're dying. But you really, really need it if pain is part of the disease process.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting. A lot of different steps. You don't realize how many different steps that you go through, so you don't know what you need. So these will be good guidelines for people to help people to get through it. So thank you.
Such a good point. You don't know what you need until you need it.
Mhm.
And so the guideline package, the series, gives it also, and I didn't talk about it, there's a grief booklet. Use it as a sympathy card. And a lot of people use it as a sympathy card. But for a caregiver who has had their person die, then is the time to pull out My Friend I Care to get an understanding of the path that they're going to be on for quite a while. So all of my material is 5th grade level, short, simple, direct, but gentle. And that's it.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for being on Autumn here and sharing this information. Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience that would just give them some information or assist them in any way, or any caregivers, anything like that?
Well, I think the key to remember is that we don't have any role models on what it's like to die, and that people don't die like they do in the movies. And so without role models and using television and the movies and how we see dying portrayed, when we're with someone who is really dying, we think something is wrong if they're not doing what the person on TV did when they died, because that's the only role model we've got, unless we're at the bedside. So knowledge about the dying process, about end of life. If you're going to be a caregiver, you need to understand what's normal dying versus what's pathological in dying. And with that support, you will be able to have actually a beautiful experience. Goal for people who work in end of life is the patient's death. Everything we do leads up to that moment of death, and our goal is to have it be a sacred, meaningful, beautiful experience. And the caregiver and the family will carry that sacred memory with them forever. That's what end of life work is about.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed speaking to you. And I'm grateful that you took the time to do this, and you're a wealth of information. So, and thank you for being a pioneer for hospice. I appreciate that. So thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun. I had a good time. I hope you did too.
I did. Okay. All right. Well, take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.